public session. Welcome to those on live stream. Also noting on live stream we have me, Nobby Clark, and Councillor Bond, and we have two apologies, one from Councillor Pottinger and one from Councillor Boyle. So can I have someone please move those? Thanks Leslie, and seconded Steve. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, declarations of interest. Is there anyone that has an interest in the agenda today that they wish to declare at this moment? No? Okay. Evelyn, sorry.
Bluff
Yep.
wastewater.
Pardon?
Bluff wastewater.
The Bluff wastewater.
Te Marama's involvement.
Yes. Okay, that gets noted. Thank you for confirming that. Don't have to accept that, do we? Okay, we do have two people speaking to us in public forum. So, Jack, welcome. I'll ask you to come to the top of the table. Jack Lovett-Hurst, and also Mary O'Byrne, and they're talking to us about the double park taxi trial. So, do you, who can give us a bit of background about that trial? Is anyone? Can you speak to that, just to give us context?
I think it's probably better if we do the public and then we can add to it.
Right. Okay, Jack, welcome. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming along. The floor's yours.
All right.
Yep, you go.
Kia ora, my name is Jack and I am on the local government board for the CCS, and I did ask the time as a representative to no one to make it.
Good on
Yeah, so you want to talk to us about the, or share your perspective on the double park taxi trial?
So I reckon that in the CBD there is not enough wheelchair parks for taxis to drop people on and off with, because you've got to have try a bit of space for the ramp to come down, and there's not enough space for the taxi ramp to come down when they're getting them out of the taxi.
Right. Yeah. So you've experienced where they just simply can't get sufficient space to be able to allow the passengers off?
Yeah.
Right. So have you thought, well, there's an obvious solution, we just need bigger parks. Is that, that's what you'd say?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Darren?
Jack, I guess there are two issues with those parks: the parallel parks, which need to be longer, but also the risk from some of those diagonal parks, because once the ramp comes down from the taxi, how close to the actual flow of traffic does it come?
That's a good question.
Well, do you feel like you're just about being loaded into the live traffic lane with cars coming past?
Like especially on like Space Rat outside Ngātiti, there's like no space whatsoever, and it's impossible to put the ramp down because there's usually a car behind the back of the taxi, and it's got to have like, I think it's a 4 metre depth or something like that, I can't remember. Yeah.
Jack,
And so what do they do, Jack? Do they just double park because there's no space big enough?
Pretty much.
And the
Right.
live traffic.
Yeah. So Jack, are there areas around the city that it would be more beneficial to have those parking spaces than others, from your perspective?
Maybe like better like mobility parking, maybe for like, especially for like taxis and stuff like that, maybe.
Yeah. And in any particular areas, like would it be East Street, that's a high priority area, or other areas?
Probably most areas would probably be Space Street, East Street, and that's about it probably.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll take Barry and then Evelyn.
Yeah, g'day, welcome.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering whether it's possible
Yeah.
for the wheelchair taxis to use the loading parks, like the where the couriers drop gear off, because they're parallel.
Mhm.
Or they're
Yeah,
straight with the
Yeah.
road. They're not coming out at an angle.
it's probably a question for our compliance team as opposed to Jack.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
I'm sure Jack would say, yeah, use any park you can. Is that for you, Jack?
On Jack's behalf, I'll say they do.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Straight with the road.
Whether or not they're allowed to.
Evelyn?
Kia ora, Jack.
Kia ora, Evelyn, how are you?
The other place that I wondered if
Yeah.
you had heard referenced
Mm-hmm.
was outside the entrance to ICL on Tay Street,
Yeah.
where the buses currently stop, where there's no provision for taxis or disability.
Mm.
Is that another problem area, or?
I don't really use the area as such, but maybe.
Okay, thank you. I know you can only speak to the areas that you know of, but I just wondered. Thank you.
Yeah. Hold on.
Okay. Are there any other questions or anything you'd like to say further, Jack? Okay, well,
No.
no.
I'm a
Okay,
bit
well, look, thank
nervous,
you
I
very
don't
much for
know.
coming. We do have Mary online, I think.
Yeah.
Mary O'Brien, yeah, welcome, Mary, so I'll ask you to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is that okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thanks very much for the opportunity to join in. I'm Mary O'Brien. I'm the Access Coordinator for CCS Disability Action. I am based in Dunedin, and part of my role is to work with councils and advocate for improved access for disabled people, and I also work closely with the Southern Branch in the Southern Local Committee that Jack belongs to. We think this trial is an excellent idea. We support around 5,000 disabled New Zealanders to live the lives that they want to lead in the community. And the feedback that we receive continually is experiences like Jack's, and they're pretty consistent across the country. We also operate the mobility parking scheme, and across New Zealand there's about 150,000 mobility parking permit holders. The other interesting thing around this is we're not aware of any similar trials like this in New Zealand, so we're really impressed with the council taking this on, and we would like to work with you and support with you to make sure that's a success. One of the key benefits of the double length parks is I can see that you will notice increased community participation from disabled people, and that basically means that we've got improved access to goods and services. So I'm just thinking about, I know there's a general practice in the new Centre City block. Well, quite often disabled people miss health appointments just because they simply can't get there. So that's the difference between being there or not. And you don't need to explain the ramifications of that. It will contribute to the economy if you've got more people coming in. You know, the people go for the appointment, they have a coffee, they meet a friend or something, and overall that improves to improved community wellbeing right across the board. We also think that the information you get from this trial will inform your mobility parking improvements and reviews of mobility parking and mobility parking policies, and we hope that this will encourage other councils to carry out similar trials. As I said, we're not aware of any other trials like this in New Zealand. I have colleagues across the country who do similar roles, and when I asked them, they hadn't heard of anything like this. So we're really pleased about this. There's definitely a need for a trial like this, and there's absolutely and utterly a need for improved mobility parking across New Zealand. In Invercargill at the moment there are 2,327 mobility park permit holders as of Sunday, so that's quite a big population. And when you think about the experience of mobility park users, which is similar to Jack's, and the fact that the demand for mobility parking is going to increase as the population ages, you're putting yourself in a good position to prepare for that. The other important thing is this really, people ask me quite a lot, what's a typical mobility park permit holder? And there really isn't one. People that we're obviously aware of are wheelchair users because it's more difficult and more cumbersome often. But you will find that mobility park permit holders range across the age range, and they're more likely to be in the 70 and 80 year age gap. And we also know that disability increases with age, and we've got an ageing population, so, you know, again, that's an indication to provide more parks, and more parks are accessible. The experience of mobility park users, in spite of the fact that I've said there's no typical park user, they're pretty common. The first one is that there's just not enough anywhere across the country. People are frequently abandon their trips because when they perhaps get in the taxi, get in the car, drive into town, and the park's taken, then generally they just go home again without doing what they wanted to do. There's a high rate of abuse of mobility parks, and that's really around council enforcement, which is an important thing again. And also the biggest issue is accessibility. And I'm just listening to some of the questions that you asked for Jack. The question about the live traffic. We hear of disabled people all the time across the country having the only way they can actually get from the taxi to the street is to go into live traffic lane. Sometimes it's because the parks aren't wide enough. Quite often it's because there isn't a drop down or a curb cut, so there's no other choice. Priority areas, I think what you chose from living in Invercargill times gone by, that's pretty good for the trial. But then again, I'm not local, but can't really comment on that. I think with the loading zones, I'm not 100% sure about this, but is that a local bylaw? So that's up to the council to decide. But again, it's safety and accessibility that would come into that again. And just a few thoughts and recommendations that we'd like to make about this trial. As I said, we really support it, and we really hope that the council promotes it widely. I'm unsure of what your monitoring program is around this, but I would suggest that you ask the patrons, would they have taken that trip if the trial wasn't operating? Or would the trip have perhaps not been accessible? So my hunch is that you'll find that you've got more people out and about because of that. The other things about the locations, are they suitable, as we've already discussed, and are they accessible? That again, the biggest problem that we find across the country, and a transport researcher that we work closely with, is the lack of curb cuts. So there might be a beautiful park, but you can't get up there. And suggestion for improvements. Obviously the feedback from taxi companies. We're really keen to support the council with this project in any way we can. We're happy to promote the trial if you provide us with the information that want to go out via our existing networks. We can directly contact mobility parking permit holders in Invercargill and email them around that. Just a little proviso on that, not everyone has an email. So it's really clear from the feedback you've had locally, from the small amount of evidence that is around mobility parking in New Zealand, and for the huge volume of anecdotal information about mobility parking in New Zealand, that there is really need for improvement. And if you're going to invest in improving mobility parks, there's two big stages to that from our point of view. And the first one is what you've done. You've listened to the disabled community, you've heard the issues, and you've set up a trial. The next really important thing is that if you are going to invest, because the complexities of it, each mobility park is almost, it's in an individual situation, depending on the location, where there's a curb cut, on the crosswalk, on the gradient, all of those things. So before you spend too much money on them, you really need to get some expert transport engineering advice from a transport engineer who also understands the lived experience of disability. So that's just to summarise. Thank you for inviting me. I think this is a great trial. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. Looking forward to supporting you in any way that we can, and yeah, good luck. I hope it goes well. Thank you.
Thank Mary, and well timed. You've just on your 10 minutes.
All right.
So I'll take one, perhaps two questions if there are any for Mary.
Thank you.
Tom?
Mary, you may have answered this already, but my question is there any town or city in New Zealand that you would hold up as an exemplar for dealing with this issue very well? And I'm not talking about this specific trial, but the whole broader question of disability parking.
There are single examples of things that we would hold up as an exemplar. The new mobility parks in George Street and Dunedin are excellent, and one of the reasons for that is that the footpath's level. There's no curbs, so that gives people more room to pull over safely and to get out, and they're on the alternate side of the streets for every block. So yes, they're very good. No, there are certain parks and certain places that people find okay or useful, but on the whole, no. If you wish, I can send you a research paper that was commissioned by Waka Kotahi 2021, I think, about the transport experiences of disabled people, and that summarises information about mobility parking as well as other things. So the broad answer is no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last one, Evelyn.
So just thank you for the information that you shared, but my question is about, is there a need to separate disability parks from disability taxi parking? And the reason I raise this is partly because of what Jack said about the unloading experience with disability taxis, and also the comments that I've had from taxi drivers, which is that their ability to even get close to a disability park is limited by the fact that other disabled people in regular vehicles are using them. So for the city, would it be positive if we actually separated the two kaupapa and actually had both disability parks and disability taxi spaces?
I'm not too sure about that. I think the main thing's having some longer and wider parks, and again it comes down to the numbers, but I think you'll probably have to survey the locals a bit around that and just find out about the numbers, and that you might get some more information from that from the taxi drivers.
Thank you.
Because there's a huge need for both. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn. Okay, look, thank you very much, Mary, for your time coming on, and I'm sure staff will reach out to you to get that paper you talked about that was commissioned around how to best practice around mobility.
That's
parking.
great.
Yeah, and thank you also to Jack for coming in, much appreciated, and you will sort of lean on you to keep us honest around this. So you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Just, I can also advise that obviously we're still in the feedback period, or I think the feedback's just actually, invitation for feedback's just closed around essentially seeking whether we should go ahead with the trial. As the team form that up, and I think it's looking reasonably positive that we will be going ahead with it, we will bring a paper back to the committee just to outline the scope of the trial and the dates, etc.
And you'll
Thank
loop
you very
Mary in on
much.
that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Right, that concludes our public forum. So thank you again to Mary and Jack. So fourth item on the agenda is the minutes of the Waste Advisory Group, or WasteNet meeting held on the 10th of June. Can I have?
I'll move that they're received pro forma.
Thank you. And seconder Barry. Okay, any discussion around those minutes? Okay, there being none, we've got a mover and seconder. All those in favour of receiving them?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, the next piece is the minutes of the Infrastructure and Projects Committee held in this room on the 2nd of July at 3 p.m.
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you,
I'll
Tom.
second those.
Thanks, Leslie. Any discussion around those minutes? Sorry, I've got to check for... Okay, there being none, we've got a move and second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Third item on the agenda is the minutes for the extraordinary Infrastructure and Projects Committee meeting held on the 9th of July. Can I
I'll
have-
move that too.
Thank you, Tom.
Second.
Second to Barry. Any discussion on those minutes? No? Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay. Tab 8 on our board books is the Bluff Wastewater Consenting Program multi-criteria analysis. So,
Tab 7.
7. Temporary road closures.
oh, sorry, temporary road closures. Trying to get through it quickly, sorry.
Kurt Munro.
Welcome, Doug.
Kia ora, thank you. The temporary road closure report, Mr Chairman, you have in front of you is essentially business as usual for the Burt Munro Challenge. All the facts are within there and the dates. I'm happy to answer any questions to this.
Move the 3 recommendations.
Second.
Okay, so I'll take it there's no questions, no one had any questions. So Darren's moving, Alex is seconding. I was going to call you Aaron for some reason there. Okay, no finals. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Sure.
Easy, thank you. Tab 8 now, Bluff Wastewater Consenting Program. So,
I'm happy to introduce the
yes,
item,
thanks,
Chair.
yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the Bluff Wastewater Consenting project, we've been providing a dashboard as part of our overall consenting program, essentially updating the committee on progress of the project. What we wanted to do today was to focus in more closely on the Bluff Wastewater project, in particularly where we're at on moving through the RMA process to eventually arrive at a best practicable option, and to seek feedback from the committee around the multi-criteria analysis that has been put together by the team that we've assembled to advise council around the project, the consenting project. So Alistair's going to be taking us through essentially the project and the multi-criteria analysis in a little bit more detail. But firstly, I'm hoping should have Andrew Collins from Harrison Grierson. There he is, on the screen as well. And essentially we've asked Andrew to be here to essentially provide council with a little bit of an update on the process that we're going through, but also what we're seeing around the country in this space, as it is a complex issue and one that we're very much taking guidance from the experts in this space around what they are seeing around the country and how best we navigate our journey through this process. So if you're happy, Chair, I'll hand over to Andrew.
Yes, I was actually going to say we might take Andrew first because
Yeah.
I think that gives some good context for where we're
Absolutely.
at.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Look, I've been involved with a number of wastewater consenting projects over the years. My background is planning, and the Bluff wastewater discharge and outfall is expiring the consent at the end of next year. So the Bluff team, the council team here, have done well to get started well in advance, because under the Resource Management Act there will be an ability to, as long as we lodge more than 6 months prior to the expiry, then the existing consent will continue to operate. There'll be no interruption to the service, of course, regardless of what happens with the new application. The application is being dealt with in a thorough way, because it's not just simply a matter of renewing an existing consent. This will be treated as an entirely new resource consent. Obviously, regard will be had to all the existing infrastructure and so on, but it is effectively a new application for a new resource consent. And what the Resource Management Act requires is, on top of consultation with affected parties and thorough assessment of effects, prior to that, it requires a thorough evaluation of potential options. So in this case, I think the papers before you, I won't talk in any detail, but the papers before you have explained how, with the help of the Stantec team, who are the engineers for the project, a long list of some 22 or more options were sort of considered and whittled down through an assessment process to a long list, and then an assessment against a range of criteria to come up with a shortlist that is currently being evaluated. And all of this is to arrive, and we hopefully will get there after another workshop, at a best practicable option, which is a term defined in the Resource Management Act. So the council team are doing everything right. They're keeping an open mind as to what the final best practicable option may be. We've engaged with the Runanga and Te Marama Incorporated, and there's also, they're having a real engagement role, whereas there's also some more consultation with other stakeholders happening at the moment. But the multi-criteria analysis, it's only a tool. It's to assist decision making. It doesn't determine the outcome. It is literally a tool that the team can use, and ultimately the project objectives, which were set at the beginning of the project, that are also in your pack there, will be used to determine the best practicable options. So I'm confident that a good process has been going through, and once the BPO is determined, there will be an assessment of environmental effects of that option, which is something that would happen over the coming summer, enabling us to lodge ideally by April next year. So in terms of what's going on around the country, Erin asked me to comment on. I mean, really what works is a thorough process, abiding by the Resource Management Act requirements, genuine open mind, genuine assessment of effects, and I'm confident that the BPO that's eventually selected will be consented and fine. I guess the opposite of that is what doesn't work is around the country are applicants that try and shortcut the process, already know what they're going to be applying for, really take tokenism in terms of consultation or assessment of options, and they can be found with shortcomings when it comes to hearings in front of independent panels. So we're determined not to do that. Look, I don't know what more I can say, really. I'm happy to answer any questions about the process.
Yeah, so Andrew, probably firstly from myself, so what are you seeing about the legislative and regulatory change that's been talked about in the current government, and how that might impact on a project that's in flight, albeit at the planning phase?
So a lot of there's effectively two legislative pathways open at the moment. There's the Resource Management Act, which of course is about 34 years old now, very tried and tested. There have been a lot of changes in that space. There have been countless different amendments over the years, including some more coming. Infrastructure is given a bit of a leg up, of course. It's certainly recognised regionally significant infrastructure, such as the Bluff wastewater system. So, that's fine. A lot of the changes there have been in the freshwater space. So the team rejected early on some of the alternative options, which would have had a freshwater receiving environment. So some of those changes won't apply to this application, regardless of which of the current shortlisted options are pursued. So that's under the RMA. The government has also introduced the fast track approvals bill. It's before the select committee at the moment. The select committee won't be reporting back until October. So I do expect a few changes there. There was a vast number of submissions. I suspect it'll get approved, probably with some extra safeguards in the process. But the Bluff wastewater project, and I believe also the alternate water supply project, were put forward for consideration in the schedules of that act. All that will really mean for this project is that we'll have to take some legal advice once the BPO is selected to see whether that fast track approvals actually offers any real advantages over the Resource Management Act yet. At this stage, the team's kept its options open by applying for that, and if it shows the fast track approvals act, if it actually, regardless if it gets on a schedule, there would still be an ability to apply to the joint ministers and have the project referred to an expert panel. And I guess the advantage of the fast track process is that ultimately there are no appeal rights other than on points of law. In this case, I think under the Resource Management Act, we're following a very comprehensive process, but one that is warranted, and I feel confident in a good outcome. So I think we'd have to seek legal advice as to which of those pathways would be best followed, but they're the main changes that have happened recently.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take questions particularly relating to Andrew's area as opposed to the paper. So I think, Pani, we've got yourself and Tom. So is your question related to Andrew's particular area?
Well, it is, because it's not wasn't included in the kōrero. So mine was really purely in regards to both Awaroa and Waihopai Runaka as well as Te Ao Marama involvement, so acknowledging that we've been part of this journey as well, that as a partner under the Ngāi Tahu Claims Act settlement 98, it also gives us provision to give practical effect to the kaitiaki responsibilities, which is around our position on this paper, which is not noted in the paper either, that we've been very clear around not supporting discharge to awa or moana, which is river or ocean.
Okay, thank you for that. So wasn't...
So I just want to add that onto the kōrero that Andrew had just...
Yeah, okay. Tom, is yours relating to Andrew particularly, or the paper?
Well, I'm not quite sure actually, because Andrew's was a pretty cross-cutting presentation, and I don't know what other presentations we're going to get, so I will make the comment if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah.
You can stop me if it's going to come up in a different presentation. I mean, I do support the multifactorial approach. I think we've got to acknowledge, though, that it is fundamentally semi-quantitative. A lot of the decisions are, based on judgment rather than based on, hard scientific numbers. So the choice of the factors at the beginning becomes very, very important, and you really want to try to make it as scientific as you possibly can. Otherwise, judgment just takes over. But what I was going to comment on, and I know, Andrew, the utility paper's not yours, but I'm going to comment on that and then go backwards. Utility paper I thought was excellent, but it does make the comment on page 45 of board books, which is what is affordable for the community. And it says, knowing how much the wastewater treatment plant upgrade will impact the community allows the financial impact of options to be understood. Not doing so early in the process means unaffordable options may progress further, setting unrealistic expectations. Now, we have $7 million in a long-term plan budget. So this maybe is a question probably more for Erin. I mean, of the selected options, how many of them could be done within that budget?
At the moment, we haven't actually quantified the final costings of those, essentially because, as you saw from that very large long list, actually going and getting essentially quantity surveying costs of all of those options would be quite an expensive exercise. So we've waited until we've narrowed that down to the short list, and then we're working through that process. I think we're pretty close to having that completed, but we haven't had the final figures through yet. My understanding from the early indications is that it's probably split 50-50, correct me if I'm wrong, Alistair, where we believe that the two fully land-based options are likely above that affordability index, and the two water-based options are probably close to within that affordability tolerance. But we need to wait for the final advice back from Stantec around the costings on that.
Can I ask then also why, given the importance of the affordability part and given that comment and the utility made about not going down tracks which are going to be unaffordable before you even start, and given the huge amount of engineering work that's going to be required, I think, for some of the options that are further down the page, why we would even embark on them. But my other question is, why have we eliminated 1A and 1C? Because both of those are coded as probably compliant, and yet we've eliminated them.
I think that's probably one that we might go through as we go through Alistair's process in a little bit more detail. What I would say is, in terms of the budget that was set for the long-term plan, one of the things that Council will have heard me talking about before is that I don't think we business case our projects at an early enough stage to make sure that when we are setting our long-term plans that we necessarily have our figures quite right at that point. We've obviously done a reasonably comprehensive business case on this one, but we started later than I would have liked, and that was simply because of the water reform process that we were going through, and that we didn't want to spend a significant amount of council and ratepayer money on a business case process that was then going to be picked up by another entity and probably thrown out and started again. So it wasn't until we got the, I guess, indications that the entity model wasn't going ahead that we then switched tact and started to go heavy into the business casing for these big Three Waters projects, which means that we are further behind in it than I would like. But I think the other piece that, and I'd throw to Andrew for this, is simply around, Andrew, can you just talk us through because I know there was quite a significant amount of discussion around whether the affordability piece should come in before we got to the shortlisting and up front, or whether it should come in later. Is that something that you're able to speak to?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a point well made, but it was important to, having heard the feedback from Te Ao Marama and the councillor that just spoke, I apologise I didn't catch your name, but did say they've expressed a clear preference towards the views for anything that, in preference for land application. It was important when going through the shortlisting process with an open mind to at least get to a level of investigation where the options can be costed and then a decision made. And affordability is one of the, it is true, it must be, has to be affordable, it has to be practical, has to be safe, has to be reliable. The objectives, if you just refer to those, will be the ultimate decision-making tool. Whatever option is selected, and from an affordability perspective only, it's obviously going to be, you'd think, leaning towards the status quo enhancement options. But whatever option is chosen, it's going to be important to be able to demonstrate why it's the best practicable option. And so, having done the costing work, we're now going to address affordability at the earliest opportunity, and that earliest opportunity will be at the workshop, I believe, on 11th of September. And that is to make a call, and whatever the call is, it probably won't meet. You know, there'll be someone who won't like it, but an overall call has to be made at that earliest opportunity to avoid, if you like, dragging out expectations for the other ones. So I don't believe, if a call had been made right at the beginning of the process to make affordability the only lens and not do the homework to test other options, I believe we would have been setting ourselves up for some difficult resource management process questions. So I do believe the right approach has been followed.
So I'm sorry to persevere, but I still don't hear an answer why 1A and 1C were deleted.
That's okay, we can talk through that when we talk through the process piece that Alistair will take us through.
Yeah, I think the other important thing to note is that there's always the ability to bring new ones in if some don't make it through, or we can't come to a conclusion with a shortlist. So there is an opportunity to bring other options in.
Yeah. Okay, we've just got one more question, then we'll come to you, Alistair, if that's okay. Yeah, Mayor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I've got a series of issues, so I just want to work my way through.
Hang on, just a minute, Mayor Clark. Are they related particularly to the area Andrew's talked through, or are they related to the wider paper?
I know they're specific to Andrew's area.
Okay, thank you.
In the reports that we've got, I don't know why there's no acknowledgement of the fast track process. I've had advice from the Minister that all these water consents, and he says all of them, so that's not just Bluff and Invercargill, are going to go through the fast track process. So why are we focusing on what the current RMA says, being mindful that the government is actually in the process of delivering a new RMA? If we go through the fast track process, we avoid the potential litigation from iwi or other interested parties that would end up taking us through the Environment Court process. So I just see us heading on a pathway that could end up with a result that we don't actually want at the end of the day.
Andrew, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So right at the moment, options are wide open for either following the Resource Management Act or the Fast Track Approvals Act. Even with the Fast Track Approvals Act, the information requirements are still very robust. There's still a requirement to consider alternatives and demonstrate how you've done that. So following the selection of the preferred option, Mayor Clark, it may be that the option is to go that fast track approvals bill. We're not at that point of deciding, but certainly all of the work and assessment that's been done will pay dividends regardless of which legislative track the council goes down.
Just two other quick...
I'm also quite attracted to the Fast Track Approvals Act. We've got to wait though for the Select Committee to report back in October, so our timing is perfect in that we should be landing at a BPO before then, and then have the ability to decide, depending on where the Select Committee lands, you know, where we go from there.
So what I hear there is really just process. We're focused on a process to get that well fleshed out, and our timing's good for that.
Through you, Chair, just a couple of other quick things that Andrew might be able to help me with. No mention anywhere of water meters, and yet the Minister again has been very carefully wording this, so he's referred to it as volumetrics, but it's just a flash name for water meters. And so that changes the landscape when you have less water being treated into the system, therefore you have less water going out the other end. And I think it would be wise for us to sit and wait to see what the select committee brings out. But the final thing I'd like to reflect on is the issue of what happens if you have an expired consent. So for argument's sake, I understand that if you are doing your best to try and resolve an issue, the current status of the consent does prevail. It doesn't just suddenly stop on this mystical date and it all falls apart. And a good example of that was in Dunedin, where I think they had a consent that was 20 years overdue. And so as long as you're exploring options, you do have time. And that time might allow us to get a picture on where the government's taking us through the select committee.
Yeah, you're quite correct. The Resource Management Act does provide for the existing consent to carry on so long as you get a valid new application lodged, in this case 6 months prior to expiry. So everything we're doing is designed to meet that deadline so that while the application's bubbling along its process to a decision, or even if it was challenged, the existing consent will carry on well past its expiry date until a new one is determined.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to actually check something that the Mayor has said, that I would in no way expect that this council would try to use the fast track process to circumvent any discussions with iwi. My expectation, like we've gone in like with a partnership conversation, any kind of inference to that kind of behaviour is just that's not on. Thanks.
Through you, Chair, I can't let that go unresolved. Look, I didn't say that. What I said was the new fast track process creates a different environment for people who wish to oppose. They get heard at the expert panel stage, and then the ministers make the decision, and there's nothing beyond that. If we want to take a pathway that's the old way, we leave ourselves open to potentially years of litigation. Because iwi have quite rightly said, right through this term and the previous term, and Hania reflected it before, iwi do not agree with the discharge being discharged to water. So that's okay, that's their position. All I'm saying is we need to be cognizant that we don't end up with a process that drags us into litigation.
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Alistair, we'll go with your piece of this.
I'm just conscious if we don't have any other questions for Andrew, we may let him get
yeah,
away
sorry.
because I'm conscious that he's currently on holiday and he's jumped on for us today. So
yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Well, you're welcome. If it's okay with you, I'll stay on just in case there's a planning question.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, Alistair.
Thank you, Andrew. Alistair Snow, I'm the project manager working with the team to... Can you hear me?
you just need
Pull
to be
it right
really
up
close
close.
with these ones, Alistair.
It's a bit tough. I can go closer to the mic. Alistair Snow, project manager for the team to get the consenting through. I had a presentation. Can we get that shown up? If you just go to the next slide, thanks.
It's in front of you, Alistair.
The clicker.
Clicker, right in front of the table.
Oh, here we go. Nice. Thanks. Just as a bit of a recap, I discussed this at the last presentation. The BPO is an established process. It has a clear definition under the Resource Management Act, and it's around the means of defining a best method for preventing or minimising the adverse effects on the environment. So it has a very, very clear definition. It needs to take regards to the nature of the discharge and the sensitivity of the receiving environment to adverse effects, the financial implications and the effects on the environment of that option when compared with other options need to be considered, and also the current state of technical knowledge and the likelihood of that option can be successfully applied. So the assessment for a BPO needs to take all those items into regard. Where are we at? as Andrew highlighted earlier, we've gone through a long list through the process to shortlist options. We've gone from 24 to 6 options. We're about 3/4 the way through to determining a preferred scheme, and that scheme would then be brought to council for approval, and that would be adopted as the best practical option. And we're probably about halfway through to actually making the application. I think, Andrew, you can correct me if you think I'm not right with that.
You're not right. Sorry, we didn't want to predetermine the process, so there will have to be some assessment of environment work for the preferred option when that's selected. But yeah, we're perhaps 30% there.
Right. Okay. Thank you. The criteria themselves, Stantec advised the project team initially on the criteria that we should be using. They've based those on their previous experience on similar types of wastewater projects, and some of that are actually in process now, and some of them have obviously completed. So it's come from their experience. The project team have reviewed these criteria, and you know, the team obviously consists of planners, which Andrew's a part of that. We've got RMA legal counsel, as well as internal counsel management staff supporting that. The criteria will be assessed or scored 1 to 5 rating as they go through it, and each criteria will be assessed by a group of experts, technical experts and subject matter experts before it actually comes to the workshop. So each individual criteria will have been assessed. And I'm not going to go through them. I'm just going to, there's 6 criteria which we'll be assessing. I'm happy to go through them if people want, or talk to any particular one if required.
I think,
Just take it as
Alistair,
read.
perhaps what might be more helpful is if we ask for any feedback on whether or not you believe there's anything that's, anything that's glaringly obvious that we've missed, any big gaps that council are seeing.
Yes, we'll take some feedback on the paper, basically. So questions on the paper?
Sorry, just before we move to that, I'm probably like to just address Tom's previous question, if that's okay, just
Yep,
around.
of course. Yep.
And Alistair, you may or may not want to jump in on this one because you're a bit closer to the optioneering piece than I was. But essentially around the original status quo option, that was essentially, as I understood it, discarded both as part of, I guess, a commitment to the partnership process that we were having with Te Ao Marama, but also as part of our consenting strategy around ensuring that we were going with a consent application around continuing to improve on the discharges to the environment that we currently have, as opposed to simply advising that we had no intention to continue to improve our wastewater discharge. Andrew or Alistair, did you have anything to add to that?
No, Aaron, that summarises it well.
Through your chair, can
Tom, yes.
I noticed in the actual list of the draft preliminary weighting of criteria that the cultural issue has actually got quite a high score. So we are going to weight the options taking into account cultural things. So to exclude an option like, well, 1C, let's take 1C rather than 1A because 1C improves it.
Yes.
To exclude 1C on the basis of a, let's call it a cultural veto, but then include a cultural filter also in the weighting of criteria is a kind of double dip in my view.
Sorry, Alistair, you may be able to speak to it in more detail, but sorry, I should have clarified this, that 1C, I believe, was eliminated around the cost of the treatment of the volume of sludge that would come out of that process. It was more around a cost-driven option, that one was discounted. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what 1C was, I'm sorry, so.
So
somebody could
1C
enlighten me.
was the status quo plus additional treatment, and it spoke about the Becker Options Review report indicating the higher costs and more sludge due to the high degrees of treatment required under that
yeah,
option.
sounds like it's in the
We
fourth
can come back with some more information from Stantec, who have obviously given us advice on those costs, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, I guess I reserve the right to keep coming back to 1C if it's simply ignored, as we go forward. 1C is basically doing what we do now, but with a higher standard of treatment before it gets released. And I suspect that even allowing for the cost of sludge treatment, it's still going to be a lot cheaper than a lot of the other options that are on the list. So I'm disappointed to see 1C. I take your point about 1A. We want to do something a bit better, but I still feel disappointed that we are not going to consider 1C.
So, and to that point, isn't it better to see 1C as a cost comparison? So it flags the higher degree of cost relating to more sludge. So let's see that related to the other options that are preferred on a cost on affordability metric.
Yeah, and I'm not a wastewater discharge expert, but essentially what we currently have in terms of the treated discharge from the Bluff wastewater plant, it's not, as we've been advised, like we're discharging a really poor quality of effluent from that plant. It is already quite a high quality, so that ability to then bring it to a higher quality again is where we see those costs starting to come in. But we can, like I say, I can bring back some further information around the exact advice that we received on that.
Well, why not include it as one of the options?
Essentially,
I mean, I'm assuming it'll score 0 in the cultural assessment part of the weighting of criteria, so that's fine. So there's a significant impediment because of that 0 rating, but I don't see why we don't include it in the. I mean, it just seems to me it's probably almost certainly going to be cheaper than any other options.
yeah, I just need to come back to you around. I wasn't involved in the exact
Yeah, I don't-
discussions
I
on the
don't
fatal
think-
floor assessment, so we'd need to just come back with some
So
advice
I
on
don't
that.
think there's any clear benefit in treating the the wastewater anymore. The standard that it's being just discharged to the marine environment at the moment is acceptable to the public health.
Well, 1A then.
And then, so I think you'll be spending additional money for very little overall benefit for the community if you were choosing 1C.
Yeah, so what I think we'll do with that, Tom, is I'll hear discussion from around the table, and then we, if there's a strong feeling, we may be able to add it to one of the motions to the recommendation through to council. So I'll take some other questions. So I think I had Pania first and then Nobby.
Yeah, I think it's important probably to provide some clarity around this cultural values and protection. So really, I mean, our position is based on research. A lot has been undertaken around the cultural impact for discharges associated with sewage treatment plants. So since 2007, there's been a number of learnings from things that have happened. So it's not just we picked this out of the sky. The other thing I want to point out, it's more than just values, it's also our tikanga and practices. So it's also really important for us on the impact of the water, the mahinga kai, like the tauroi, our oyster beds are already at risk, and other sea life. So literally it's a whole barrel of things under those headings.
Nobby?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Support Tom's view that we should have 1A in. 1A gives us the benchmark that we compare everything else to because it's a status quo. And I've heard
1A or 1C with
1A.
Okay, so I think Tom
1A's
Tom was recommending one. Well, not recommending, but speaking to 1C.
I think
he
you can,
was, but at the very end he said, well then let's just put in 1A then. And that would be my view as well. Because the advice we're getting from staff in the paper and what we're verbally getting here is the quality of the discharge at the moment is compliant. And while it's very nice to say, well, we can improve that, putting aside the cultural issues, where the opposition is, but just looking at the quality of it, why do we need to keep enhancing it? I mean, where do you stop? I mean, there are some very significant costs to ratepayers going forward for this, and the issue that strikes me in the report is that while it bumps up the city rates, because Bluff is not in isolation, when you look at the figures in there around the average income in Bluff and the average income in the city, it's going to hurt people in Bluff more than it hurts those that are living in other parts of the city. So those increases, which could be up to $1,000 a year, need to be managed carefully. And so I'd have 1A in as an option. I think to exclude it this early part's not right. It's really interesting. I spoke to somebody from Iwi that was involved with the previous consent, which is a long, long time ago. And at that stage, council wanted to put quite a long pipe out into the Bobo Strait. And it was Iwi's insistence that it had a very short one because it wanted it to be affected by the tides and the waves. They thought that was a better way forward. So I don't know what's changed. And I'd like to know as we go forward where that opposition's coming from.
Yeah, so look, I think it's important we don't get into a serve and volley game here around iwi or cultural significance, because my view would be, and I'm interested in other people's perspective around the committee table, is that, and referencing what Pania talked through, I don't think there's anyone in the community that wants to degrade the oyster beds, the seafood and that are in and around Bluff or other outlet areas wherever wastewater goes to. So, I don't see in my own mind, but I'm interested in other people's perspective, that that's an iwi specific need. I think that's a community need that we would all probably reflect through. So, I think it's important for us as council and as chair that we recognise that what we're trying to achieve here is outflow from wastewater, which is an outcome of humanisation, all humans, that we want that going to our environment in the best possible quality, so the degradation of our environment is absolutely minimised. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve here, and that achieves the outcomes for all peoples and parties. So yeah, that's my perspective on this. I'm interested in some feedback on that.
The only thing I'd like to add, Chair, is that what we're acutely, I guess, conscious of as a team is that the process of getting wastewater treatment plants discharges consented is a very complicated and also a very expensive one when you don't get it right. There are, I think Andrew would be able to confirm this, but my understanding is that there are some discharges where councils have been trying for best part of 10 years to get their discharge consented, which means that we have taken a reasonably conservative approach in coming up with a best practicable option that we would then put forward with a final consent application. We can obviously take a more, I guess, more risk with the process if that's council's desire, but so far we've very much been taking that conservative process, making sure the likes of Andrew and Stantec are giving us the big thumbs up each step along the way of saying, yes, we think you guys have done everything right. If you wind up being challenged through the consenting process or through an appeals process, we think you're on good solid ground. We can obviously take some more risk in that respect, but essentially that's what's guided us so far. Is there anything, Andrew, that you'd add to that?
No, I think just hearing the discussion, we obviously wanted to have a short list. The status quo stayed in for the initial processes. It certainly wasn't rejected early on. It stayed in, obviously, from the long list through into the long list. And it was only when we were getting to a short list, I frankly only wanted 3 on there myself. We ended up with 4, and then we've ended up with a couple of variations of 2 of them, which has got us to 6. We didn't want to have too big a shortlist because the idea was to do thorough evaluation, but not be excessively costly. That said, it's been clear all the way along that any of the options can be brought back in to the mix if at the workshop it needs to. So while we've been really wanting to partner the whole way and be cognizant of the cultural issues, we felt that the 4 would provide a spectrum from recognising the cultural considerations and enhancing to a smallish extent the status quo through to more significant but costly change, and they are all being investigated. If, and please allow me just to say if, but I mean if the affordability considerations end up ruling out the more expensive options, the discussion does have to be had. Are those 2 status quo enhancement options better than nothing from a cultural perspective? If the view was expressed that really that's not the case, then I believe the status quo would have to be brought back into the mix. To, you know, no one wants to spend money if it's not achieving a certain positive effect. At this stage, all of the shortlisted options are intended to be very mindful of environmental, cultural, but also affordable considerations. So yeah, hope that helps in some way. It'll be quite a significant meeting in September.
Yeah. So just a question on that workshop. At the workshop, were we intending to see the costs of each of those different options?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's probably important, I think, in my view, that we see, you know, the status quo as a comparative to that, if we're seeing costs.
Well, I don't think that's going to be costed, Chair. And I would say, I mean, you know, the paper's brought to council for comment, I guess. But really, I would have thought that if the mayor, the deputy mayor and the chair of the committee wanted to see 1A, then we ought to be able to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's no problem at all. We can take it in. We were only advising the reasoning as to why we'd ruled it out, but based on feedback of the committee, we'll bring it back in.
Leslie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to comment on 1A, that I would have thought the fatal flaw comment that the condition and remaining life of the existing Fovo Street outfall may not match the life of the new consent would have been a pretty major fatal flaw mark against 1A remaining in.
Well, that'll come out in the net present value calculation of the capital brought back if it has to be replaced.
Yeah, I suppose.
For 1A, that would mean a whole new computing of the fatal flaw figure. If the condition in the remaining life is not going to match the life of the new consent,
so
you're going to put a lot of work into costing out what you will do about the condition in the remaining life to make it match the life of the new consent. And you're probably going to rule it out anyway, because that would hugely add to the cost of 1A.
Yeah,
so 1A just seems to me, 1A just gets eliminated.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think probably the way of addressing that with 2 things would be, one, that the R&M cost or additional capital cost of ensuring that it lasts at least the life of the consent would be costed into 1A if that was presented. But the second question is, it's probably an Alistair question, is 1C, does that enhanced version of 1A take account of the fact that the 50 metre discharge outfall needs work?
Yeah, yes it will.
It does. So, yeah, so in effect 1C is the addresses that issue of that you're pointing at.
That's my point. 1A, to me 1A is totally out of the conversation.
So so 1A becomes 1C because you address the contingency that's been highlighted. Yeah.
If we've got absolute assurance on that condition and remaining life, which would mean a whole new range of costing to make 1C come into the picture, but yeah, my whole point is 1A just seems totally out of the picture.
Yeah.
For a very, very obvious fatal flaw that's right there.
Yeah, so addressing it another way, 1C presents 1A in a functional format, which a key part of functionality is it's the same life as the consent.
We'll see when it's been fleshed out, but one
That's what should
A
happen.
is definitely not fleshable.
Yeah, okay. Pania, and then we might bring this to a close.
Okay, just to go back to my one. Just in relation to the treatment, I think, the level of treatment. So I think on page 32, I was just had read on, depending on the level of treatment, management of byproducts can be problematic. And that there is like, you know, how are we able to guarantee that high level of treatment when it's problematic regardless?
Alistair, do you have a view on that, or Andrew?
It's probably one addressed to the engineers. I think they were referring to the additional treatment possibilities would generate additional sludge, if you like, that needs to be then discharged elsewhere, and it comes with an array of considerations. But look, I'm afraid I'm a planner, and it's really a question we could ask of Stantec.
Yeah, the only other question I had on the report was related to, I think, on page 7 of 8 of the presentation, or board books 26, I think it is that ranking of, public health, the percentage in terms of public health rating below those, some of those other perspectives. So I would have thought, the public health good of it is one of the highest ranking pieces. Is there any comment on that, Andrew or Erin?
Andrew, are you able to give us, I guess, based on your planning experience, that balance between, the public health versus the other criteria that we'd be assessing against? I think the key, obviously the key reasonably chunky ones there currently are the public health, the cultural, the affordability, and the biophysical in terms of sort of the carbon offset, etc.
Yeah, I can't read what's on the screen, and I don't have that document handy, but just to say that one of the project objectives is that whatever option is selected has got to be safe. Public health is right up there. There is no chance that an option could be selected if the public health people are not convinced that it's safe. So not sure if I answered the question, Erin, but it's a very important consideration. And whatever percentages were ascribed on that page that you're looking at, I just come back to say, look, it's a starting point, if you like, and that you can then do sensitivity testing and say, what happens if you change the percentage to something different, and would the outcomes be different? And it just allows, it's really just a tool to help informed decision making.
I think, though, we can take on board that feedback back to the broader group that Council have just questioned whether that public health criteria is weighted heavily enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's the topical issue of why we're here, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because of the Hawke's Bay issue many moons ago. Okay, so any final discussion or questions?
I'm not going to speak to the application because I said I wouldn't,
Yes, you were, yes.
but I have a question whether we need to actually, to better inform the table as a whole, what has progressed within legislation, including RMA practice since 1999, because I think none of us still live in the way that we lived in 1999. No, and if I look as a practitioner in the past, we were in the very early stages of testing the RMA in 1999. The Ngāi Claims Settlement Act had only been in existence for a few months, and a lot of the things like that have not, including docks, coastal marine area, I've forgotten, the policy statement that we enacted in 2015. All those sorts of things have come into play since 1999. So this application has got to be assessed by us against the knowledge that we've acquired since 1999.
So without a response, I think that's something that should be covered at the workshop. Absolutely.
I think so, because I'm looking at the economic one, and I think we need to understand the legislative changes that are influencing this application as well.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'll look for, I think I'll probably split the recommendations into 3 being 1, 2 and 4. So the receiving of the report, the receiving of the resource containing process roadmap, and the receiving of the Bluff wastewater consent affordability assessment. Look for someone to thing those motions, and then take 3 separately, just because I think there's a bit of discussion around.
I'll thing them, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for thinking them. I'm getting a bit tongue talking. So your Darren is any seconder? Steve second. Okay, so for 1, 2 and 3, all those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
1, 2 and 4, sorry. Yes. Just making sure you're awake there. 1, 2 and 4, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So 3.
May I be recorded as an abstention, please?
Yes, on the basis of a conflict of interest. On the basis of a conflict of interest.
Or a perceived conflict
Yeah,
of
perceived.
interest?
Yeah. And then, so 3, do I have a mover and a seconder? Not a thingy. A mover and a seconder for 3. Endorses the best practical options, multiple criteria and weighting methodology for the short list of options.
Second.
We've got a seconder. Okay, so it being on the table, let's have a vote. Are we prepared to endorse those best practical options, and are we within that bringing in 1C?
And so that would be my question, Chair, is that and obviously we've already moved that option now, but I got the impression that there was a request for us to amend the short list of options, which I think would be helpful for that to happen through the resolution.
Yeah, so the mover and seconder, are you happy for 1?
No, the resolution's on the table as it stands without that inclusion.
Right, yeah, that's what I was trying to clarify.
That's what I seconded, without including 1C. Yeah.
Okay.
So how are we going to deal with the 1C matter? Because otherwise I'll vote against it, and it may be that there's a majority against.
That's your option.
So what I'm proposing is we
That's your
put that, and if it's defeated, and then we'll go to a second motion. So we've got that motion on the table endorsing the best practice options, which doesn't include 1A or 1C, just for clear. Okay, all those in favour, show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You've got Darren as well.
No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rear.
Rear on screen.
Okay, against?
Chair, can you just clarify what you just said? What have you asked us to vote on? Because it's not clear to me.
Asking you to vote on 3, which is effectively as the paper recommends, so it's without 1A or C.
Right.
Yeah, I supported without one.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got 5, 4.
6.
So
Just call the division again, I'd say.
yeah. So all those in favour of that motion as it sits there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's carried. Okay. Yeah, does anyone want their vote recorded against that?
And
Barry
I
does.
need to be recorded as an
So
abstention.
have we just dropped the idea of 1C, have we?
Yes.
In effect, we have, yeah.
Well, I definitely want means recorded against.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do too. Yeah.
And Chair, I think Nobby's
Nobby has still got it.
voted he wants his.
Yeah. Okay. No, he's just put his hand up, so I think he's not allowed to speak. Okay, tab 9, crash reporting. Thanks, Alistair. And thanks also, Andrew, for attending. Yeah, well on holiday. Okay,
Good.
Nobby. You're on mute.
Just to clarify the last vote, before we get to September's workshop, this committee ruling or decision will have to go past full council.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's right. Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, crash reporting.
Good, Mr. Chairman. The report you have in front of you is a 5-year report that covers all crashes in the Invercargill boundary, and it examines trends, and I'm just going to talk through a couple of those trends with you. Overall, the crashes in Invercargill are trending downwards. Crashes at intersections are going in the opposite direction. And there's a number of reasons for that. We have around 13% are alcohol and drug induced. About 60% are speed, and the rest are inattention within those intersection crashes. So there are a number of engineering solutions we can come up with in the future. Severity of our crashes peaked in 2022. It's come down a little bit since then, but severity is a good marker of speed-induced crashes as well. I might leave it at that for now, and I'm certainly open to questions about any part of the report that you want to talk to.
Yeah, so can I just clarify before we move on? What you've said there is that a number or the majority of crashes are to do with drug and alcohol.
No, 13%.
13% are drug.
Yes.
And how
and
many?
Alcohol, a mixture of the both.
Oh, right.
There's also a factor of speed in that as well. It's a little bit higher if you factor in going too fast, being on drugs and alcohol. It increases that exposure as well.
Right, okay.
All right. So these are the factors we examine.
Yeah, okay, so questions in regard to this report?
Just one quick question. I just wonder if, I suppose there's no way to do it, but the problem possibly is factoring in, mobile phone use whilst driving, because I mean, that's a huge distraction, in my view. So, and I see so many people doing it in my day-to-day driving, but it's never factored into these.
It wasn't a factor I examined. Yeah, it wasn't a factor I examined.
It wasn't a factor?
It wasn't a factor that I examined specifically. I was just filtering out the most obvious causal factors.
And I've got one other quick question. How do they, are they saying that a fatality costs roughly $5 million? This is on page 62 of the board book's economic costs. I just wonder how they come to such a large number for if I'm reading that correctly. I could be wrong, but I have read those sort of numbers before, and I just always wonder how does something cost that much? I mean, it's tragic, of course, but
through the chair, when I started my engineering career, a fatal crash had an economic cost to New Zealand of around $1.1 million. And given my age, it was some time ago. So those factors have been updated over the years. So it takes in the cost, the societal cost, and some tangible and intangible costs which we assign a value to. So the cost of a life, that person no longer contributing to the economy by working, and the flow-on effects for that. So there's a number of different things in there, and that's what they've come up with. I think in the report I do outline the range of values that NZTA came up with, and they've found these values to be appropriate. And essentially they are economic analysis targets that we use, and variables that we use to assess it.
Target though, because you could apply that to any fatality from anything at an early age, I guess. So.
Through the chair, yes, you can. However, those values are used for benefit cost analysis, and justifying, and it works. So the benefit cost analysis is a constant. So for example, if it's 4 times the benefit to the cost, the BC's 4, that's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Just a bit of clarification.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, yes, Alex.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I know obviously it's not contained in the report because it's from 2019 to 2023, but I just wondered, based on the high level of incidents at the Yarrow Street new intersection that we've put in, have we had any incidents since then? in that particular?
None that I know of. No, it's well, it achieved two things. I think when I last presented that, it slowed down the traffic negotiating it. It's made it safer for pedestrians. So we have that element that reduces the exposure.
Excellent, thank you.
Inevitably, though, Chair, there will be somebody who doesn't even notice that there's a system of lights that has gone in now.
Goes through. Yeah, stupidity.
Same thing happened at the introduction of the Don Street and
Yeah.
Devron Street lights when they went in back in the 90s.
Okay, so next steps. Doug?
Mr. Chairman, our next steps are to analyse this. We're also going to update it for 2024 as well and see what the trend is there. And then we'll identify a long-term plan of interventions. We also want to do some corridor treatments where it's appropriate. If we have a consistent level of exposure at consecutive intersections, we need to look at that as a corridor route, as well as minor safety works, and with a particular focus on pedestrians.
Yeah. So just with that, in the Yarrow Street is probably the example, and also the one at Mill Road and Bainfield Road, which we've made some modifications to. On that, have we had any feedback on the modifications there? Like, has there been any close calls since we've made those changes?
None. We've had no feedback other than positive for the adjacent land users. With Bainfield, we haven't heard a thing. But it was only very recently completed.
Yes.
So we need to let that settle.
Yes, yeah. Because it would be good to see where our most problematic, where we can make the biggest impact. And Yarrow Street obviously is the example, right? Where we've made an intervention there, there's some cost, but obviously, there's been some benefit. Whereas other intersections, and I know someone that had a crash in the weekend at an intersection down south, and it was just driver error. I mean, you couldn't have prevented that no matter how good the road was. The weather was perfect, it was just a driver error, so.
Mr. Chairman, that's absolutely right, and that is a factor. Some people make mistakes. They absolutely do.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Alan,
Just another quick question, Doug. Back in the olden days, there used to be a lot of,
Horses and carts.
Horses and carts. But when they misbehaved, there was people used to get prosecuted for careless use. Do you ever sort of think that
There was stops.
now that doesn't seem to happen at all? So if somebody does something wrong and they can't drive properly and they go through a red light, there used to be often there was a fine. You got fined for that. That doesn't happen anymore because we don't have a local traffic department here in Invercargill sort of policing these things, and that's what they used to do on a big scale. Do you think that could be an issue as to why things are like they are?
Police still prosecute.
When I've never heard of anybody ever prosecuted.
If somebody run into a car outside our house, they got
suppose
prosecuted.
when they get caught. You don't have to answer that, Doug.
No. Well, I'm just saying, because day before yesterday, I seen a car go around the roundabout in town here, slowly, and it turned up and it went down to down the crescent on the wrong side of the road, heading towards the railway station. And I just thought probably somebody.
That's quite a good feat.
Probably a bit of driving intuition. I see a lot of these sort of things.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, very, very briefly.
Yes, very briefly, please.
Driver behaviour is a factor we take into account with crashes, and yes, sometimes driver behaviour is appalling. The only thing we would probably look at for red light runners would be red light cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an investment we would make with NZTA, subject to it being a benefit.
Yeah. Evelyn, last question.
Yes, Doug. Just in terms of the crash data, are you going to run it alongside the speed changes that we've made to see also whether that has had an impact on lessening or not changing? Because I think it's important. We're just about to the review period of that, and I think from my perspective, I'd like to see whether or not we have actually made any traction at all on the speed-related contribution to some of these more egregious accidents. No, they're not accidents, they're crashes. Because driver error includes choosing to speed, doesn't it?
Through the chair, yes. Whenever we do an intervention, it is usual practice to reflect on that after a 12-month period and again at a 5-year point to measure the long-term effectiveness of any interventions we have, and certainly with speed we are looking at the changes we've made in speed limits as well. So it's part of our ongoing long-term strategy.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you for that. Doug, mover and seconder for receiving this report, Darren and Peter. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, regional transport, Doug.
Right. Mr. Chairman, the Regional Public Transport Plan Review, the Regional Public Transport, the RPTP, is in place, has been in place here since 2021, and within the first 3 years it is recommended that it is reviewed. Now that review can be short, long, whatever it may be, but it's also testing the effectiveness of the priorities that are within that plan. And so the short and medium term priorities are what we would look at with this, just to make sure that firstly they suit our needs, and secondly, because we are procuring a new service, we need to make sure that the plan will align with that service as well. So we have to make sure that everything's pulling in the same direction. So this will be a once-over brief review of the program, just to make sure that it's still effectively meeting the public's needs.
Okay, thank you. Questions regarding this report? I have one. It seems to be that it's still heavily weighted to a bus strategy.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, the current RPT is. Now, with a review, it may not be that. So we may again go through the options that I think I've previously discussed with the committee. So the purpose of the review is to look at what we've done, look at the direction we chose at that point in 2021, and then to see if it is actually what we need still. There is an element of public consultation with the review as well. So we would engage with our stakeholders and the public.
Yeah, I didn't get that feel from the medium-term goals, but
Right.
that's clearly we're not heading down the road of just a bus strategy.
The goals would be reviewed, the priorities would be reviewed, and
Yeah.
that's the purpose of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Can I, Evelyn? Sorry.
Just Doug, within the looking at the public transport, particularly accessibility by people to areas that they find difficult to access at the moment, and looking at more events-related activities, is there any interest or has there been any discussion about looking at more events-related transport? So you pay $2 to go to something that happens at Queen's Park, but you're coming from South City or you're coming from Waikiki, where you wouldn't normally be able to access Queen's Park so easily. Have we talked about that, or are we going to talk about that?
Mr. Chairman, no, it's not something that's been specifically requested. Certainly, from my consulting background, it has been something that's been implemented in other areas, putting on special buses for special events. But that is in conjunction with the operator, and it comes as a cost to council because it's unsubsidised travel. So the subsidy doesn't apply there. Now council can choose whether or not to make the bus free or make the bus $2. I think the Oyster Festival puts on buses, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we at Aotearoa have had buses for things that we have run down there as well. But I mean, and the reverse could be true. Something that's people coming to Invercargill from Bluff. But that's what I was meaning: destination or event-related activity. And should we be looking at whether we encourage that? But I take your point about cost.
Mr. Chairman, I think that we should. I think it should form part of a plan because it's again related through to accessibility. So accessibility is about work and leisure and school. So those three elements need to be met with a service, whether that service is regularly timetabled or whether it is, again, special events, that can be addressed within a plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, can I have a mover and seconder to receive this report?
Move.
Alex and Leslie. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay. Strategic capital projects.
Yes, so Steve will be talking to
Steve's
that one
going.
today
Sorry, yep.
in Lee's absence while he's on leave.
Okay, welcome Steve.
Thank you. So the first project is Branksheim, and the project is in reg, is under amber. So the reason for amber is time and money. So we've received a program that has been provided through to March, April 2025, which is the delay or the extension is due to prolonged bad weather. And the team has split at present between livening work in the north and pipe works in Myers. We will soon have the first fresh water passing through the northern section, which is obviously a great achievement. And the current estimate to complete is tracking at 2.5% over budget, but we're working to bring that down, and it is currently 800 and reducing. Moving on to Rugby Park.
Yeah, go through them all and then we'll take
Go through them all,
Yep.
then come back. It's currently in green. Stage 2 is underway. We've found a few issues with services around the lift area and other issues with connecting details. Engineers and installers are working on a solution which has pushed some minor steel insulation into after the season, and a few unexpected services have been found in the piling area. These are not on the as-built plans, and we're working on sleeving these through the pile caps.
Steve, what I might get you to do is just go through the amber and red ones.
Amber and red?
We'll take it as
Sure.
read that everyone
Okay,
has read the other ones.
sure.
In terms of why they are in the status they are.
Sure. Okay. This CAB, the civic building. So it's an amber. Further options are being explored, and minor works are being undertaken on levels 1 to 3 to accommodate the building staff. This work will conclude in early August. Engineers have also started to review the building's seismic assessment to ensure it is up to date and using the latest standards and guidance.
Excuse me, Chair, can I just add to that piece? I'm just conscious that there may be a question just around the seismic work that's continuing post the decisions that have been made around the decant. Obviously, regardless of whether or not we decant, we do expect that there's likely a future for this building, which means that we need to make sure that we understand the condition of the building to inform any future decisions around its future. So that's why that work that was already in train continues through to completion. Sorry, Steve.
Do we have any idea of the quantum of the cost of the minor work that's been undertaken on levels 1 and 3?
True. I'm sorry. That's a piece that I've not been closely involved in. We'd need to bring you back a cost around that. Yeah. I'm conscious that moving forward with the CAB work as well, that this project will essentially be put on pause from a strategic projects perspective as we then move obviously through the decant phase, and there'll be some separate reporting coming to council around the decant work.
Yeah. Because I think we don't want to be spending money when we're committed to a decant, do we? Okay, and then the Te Anua?
So it's currently in red. The project team has received final bids, and costs advice and options papers is due to the council in July, which is come and gone. On site, the demolition is in the clean-up phase and running on schedule. We plan to engage the main contractor in August. Now that we have the firm pricing for the build and confidence in the experience pricing, we're currently 12.8 million over budget.
So can I just get some clarity? I think Erin probably come to you on that 12.8 figure, how that's made up.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. So essentially the figure's made up of a little over the $6 million overspend, which accounts for the additional for the building, as well as the below the line costs essentially of project management, quantity surveyors, etc., which makes up the initial just over $6 million, plus the additional money from an experience perspective and those other things that we're currently going out for consultation on around the car park and the Green Star elements. What it doesn't include is the external funding that is currently essentially running at risk on the project. So that's additional to those figures. But from a project team perspective, essentially if we were to move ahead currently with the building, and the experience as scoped, that's the shortfall. Obviously, the process that we're running at the moment is to run that public consultation process for council to receive feedback and then obviously advise the project team around a change of potential scope in that project to potentially bring that that forecast down from the existing figure.
Okay, thank you. And just another point on that, so that the forecast or the costing for the build, and Steve, you might be able to answer this, which I think is about 6.8 over, that's off the original budget, isn't it? Which was set 4.5 odd years ago. Is that correct?
I can speak to that. That is based on the original budget, and with Patricia would look at me, plus the inflation that was put into this long-term plan to inflate that budget into current figures.
Yeah.
But as noted during the paper discussed on the museum, there were some elements that had been pulled into the scope of the project and put forward as part of that that current cost, which weren't in the original scope of the project, being the Green Star and the car park.
Yeah.
And sorry, I should note additional car park, as there is existing car parking.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. I think there's probably nothing else to cover on there in terms of everything else is green and running. Any other final comments from yourself, Steve, or from the project team?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you for that. So, questions? No? Okay. Right, can I have a mover and a... Oh, the Mayor's there, sorry. Mayor Clark? Mayor Clark?
Gotcha. Just wanted to clarify what was said by Aaron. So, the 12.8 million is the underwrite capacity that council committed to some time ago.
No, the 12, sorry, Mayor, the 12.8 is essentially the gap between the existing project budget and the current costings for the project.
Yes.
The underwrite that council then provided and was hoping to get external funding for essentially leaves the additional gap over and above the 12.8 million.
Which is approximately 6 million.
Yeah, which is which is where the figure of approximately $19 million in total of potential financial impact comes into play. Patricia's not looking like she wishes to add anything to that, or maybe she does. Nope, she's happy.
Sorry, Leslie, did you have a question?
Oh no, I was just going to say pretty much what Aaron said. The underwrite that we committed to was that
Was the funding,
6.5
external
for
funding.
the external funding that might not happen.
Yeah, that's right.
So this 12.8 is
Separate.
separate.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. Okay, so can I have a mover and a second to receive the Strategic Capital Projects Report and the ICC PMO program dashboard and note the current status, including the project risk assessment? Thanks, Tom. Seconder?
Second.
Thanks, Leslie. Any final comment? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, CCTV.
Chair, I might move to the end for
Yes,
this one.
thank you. Yes, so welcome also Richard Hutton, who's the IT head for council. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Essentially, this report was put together off the back of a request for further information that we received from Councillor Pottinger. The specific request is outlined in the report, but essentially it was seeking further information off the back of a report that was provided to the committee, seeking further information around choices made around licensing costs and essentially cloud-based versus physical server storage. In response to that question, this paper has been put together, and it also obviously notes the breakdown of the costs on the project spent to date. Is there anything in particular? I don't know, Richard, if you wanted to add anything, but otherwise we'll just take any questions on the report.
Okay, any questions on this? Pania.
I just have one question on page 74. I understand that there will be ongoing costs.
Sorry, Pania, could you just grab the microphone a bit closer, please?
Okay, page 74. So I know there's going to be ongoing costs around licenses and that, and upkeep and maintenance. What is the cost? I mean, every license is different.
Yeah, so in terms of the actual breakdown of the costs, we haven't provided that because essentially it formed, at the time we were putting this report together, part of the bidding process essentially from the tenderers. What I can, I guess, say to that without giving away commercial and confidence information is that the costs form a significant portion of that ongoing operational cost in terms of, less than half, but more than a quarter. So a significant sort of portion is that ongoing licensing fee, which was an interesting piece for me once, I got involved in the project. It wasn't necessarily something that I'd expected, to have an ongoing licensing fee simply for having cameras working. But I suppose it made sense when it was explained to me as being similar to having your PC and your Microsoft license, and the fact that there's obviously work in supporting that software and making sure that the software is upgraded and kept free of bugs, etc. I guess makes sense from that perspective. And essentially, as I noted in the report, while I understand that there are some types of cameras that you can operate without a license, my understanding is that that's not common with the types of cameras that we're looking at around that, essentially number plate recognition, etc. And certainly didn't form part of the offering of any of the bids that we received from tenderers.
So more likely more than Microsoft Word.
Sorry.
You'd expect so. Darren.
Yes. I guess that part of the reason for the more expensive cameras and the more expensive licenses is in around making sure that in this day and age you've got sufficient firewalls in place, which you have to increase with the greater number of cameras as you roll them out. Because as we've seen all over the place, there are nations and people with so much time on their hands that like to hack into stuff and mess it up, as we experienced with that lovely CloudStrike a couple of weeks ago. Great job in getting us back up and running again so quickly too. Thank you very much. It is interesting to note that the amount of storage that's being looked at for this system is greater than council's storage currently. Now this annoys me a little bit because it's there really for police who are contributing nothing. And that does annoy me. I mean, we're there to try and help with law enforcement for the safety of our citizens, but this is all at our cost. And I'm sorry, but that's not on. And maybe we don't store stuff for as long. There's a shorter window of time.
Yeah, it's definitely a bugbear, isn't it? Because there's operational savings from a police perspective with this sort of technology around our city, and that's proven through other cities, so it is frustrating. Richard, my question to you, being a specialist in this area, is the hardware versus cloud storage piece. Have you got any sort of perspectives or thoughts on that you could share with the committee?
Well, the decision we're taking is consistent with what we're doing in other areas of ICC. So if you look at Technology One as a platform, that is a cloud-based platform. If you look at the contact centre solution we now have, driving the phones in our contact centre, that's a cloud-based solution. Same with the Microsoft Teams environment we're moving to in terms of our other calling capability, and what we're looking at with respect to Outlook and Office as well. So these are things that all organisations are looking at quite carefully, and there's no doubt that pricing around cloud-based technology is coming down, and pricing around storage is coming down, and the ability to be able to flex in terms of capacity makes it, you know, very attractive. And I think to the other point around cybersecurity, you're looking at other third parties who specialise in this to provide you with that capability. So it is the trend, and it's a trend that we in the council have been following, and so it makes sense also when we look at the volume of storage we're looking at now, you know, as the first phase of CCTV, that we actually look to use the same capability to provide that outcome.
So in your sort of specialist opinion, this is the optimum solution for us versus any other?
And over time, Mr. Chair, the costs associated with this have come down, and so it's made it even more attractive. There are more players in the market around storage. You know, it used to be AWS and Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure, but there are other players that are coming in that are starting to drive those costs down. So it's becoming more attractive, and more people are looking at it as they refresh their hardware. We are at a good point where we're taking the decision now, and those costs, and we're seeing the benefit of that.
Okay. Tom?
And this just taking Dan's point a bit further, the issue of storage costs is actually referred to if we had our own equipment. You know, that's where it appears in this report. But I'm assuming that even if it's cloud-based, there's still a charge for storage depending on how much. So could we get have you got a feeling for how much it's going to cost us to store, what did you say, 75 terabytes per annum, and then keep it for how long have we said that we would keep it for?
As I recall, we've reduced it back from the original 3 months back to 1 month of storage.
Okay. So how much is that storage going to cost us?
I'm just noting, Trudy, did you want to add something to that?
I'd just say we've aligned it with how long we keep body camera footage of 28 days.
So really my question is, how much does that cost us to store 28 days worth of information?
Well, the estimate is we require 75 terabytes, and you pay by the terabyte on an as required basis. And so as we ramp up, if we were to take the list the list price that's available online from one of the storage providers, it's approximately a $10 per terabyte per month.
Can you do that arithmetic for me? How much will it cost us to store for 28 days?
Per month, what, $750? 75 times 10?
75
$750 per month to store 75 terabytes of information.
Is that right?
So cumulatively across 12 months is about $9,500.
Okay, thank you.
At the same time, when you look at page 75, what it's saying is if we had an on-premise solution, it would be a lot more. That last bullet point on page 5.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Right, any questions for either Erin or Richard? Evelyn, sorry.
No, that's right. But we still have the capacity under this, if there is legal action being taken, to retain the information that is required for the prosecution until such time as it is all appeals and whatever. Yeah. So the 28 days is only for uncontested information. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You could lift the information from the cloud and store it separately.
Yeah.
So put it aside and hold it indefinitely.
Yep. So there'll be
the
process, if it's part of formulation of a investigation by police, that they will request information through channels and then probably take away that information if they're successful to store it in their own system until. Yeah. Leslie, that would be your sort of legal opinion on that? Yeah.
Within the 28 days, they would need to have alerted it, so it could then be divided off.
Yeah, and then clipped and then put into their own storage.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for coming along today, Richard. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive the CCTV project information request. Thank you, Evelyn. Seconded, Tom. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, that brings to the end our public piece of the Infrastructure and Projects Committee. So can I have a mover and seconder to move us into public excluded? Peter and Alex. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for those that were on with us online.